Hello and welcome to a special episode of Coaching Diaries from the Honest Football Podcast. Today we're actually meeting Brian Barnes. Now the reason this is a special episode is, for those of you who are interested in other sports outside of football, it's actually a Super Bowl this week. So with that in mind, we thought we'd go and speak to an American football coach. So there will be an interchanging of names today, so from football to soccer and all of that. But we meet Brian Barnes. So Brian works and is also a high school and a college American football coach. And actually, we sort of really delve into and discuss the differences between coaching and a soccer team, an American football team, and actually the similarities as well. And I think we both learned lots about each other's sports. We have a little prediction at the end to see how who thinks is going to win the Super Bowl. It really is a great episode, both from the sort of initial level of just comparing the two sports, and actually, if you dig down and listen to some fantastic advice from Brian, he's a very, very experienced coach. And you just get to hear from Brian, who's really passionate about lots of sports. He obviously works at an elite level club and beyond that as well, even coaching from youth American football and all sorts, really. So it's brilliant just to hear from him. If you want to follow Brian, you can follow him at Coach Barnes20. This won't be the last from him, I'm sure that you'll hear from him. But yeah, just a brilliant episode. And we'd love to hear from you, who you think's going to win the Super Bowl this weekend, and also what you think of the episode. And don't forget that you can follow us at Honest Football Free on Twitter. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Brian Barnes to our podcast. So, Brian, you're not our usual sort of guest on the Honest Football Podcast, because obviously we're going to have this confusion probably throughout the whole of the show. But, you know, we're a soccer podcast, as you would know it. But obviously your background is, as we would call it, American football. But we're really going to talk about more the coaching aspect of it. So before we do that, obviously, just to welcome you to the show, just tell us a bit about yourself, you know, sort of growing up in terms of your background in, you know, American football and the whole sort of coaching aspect of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk to you about the game. I've been involved with, you know, the game of American football pretty much my entire life. I played it at a young age. All the way through high school graduation, and then ultimately I immediately got into coaching the game. I've had the opportunity to work, you know, here in the United States at the high school level, at the college level, as well as for the Detroit Lions in the National Football League. And so it's been a really big part of my life, and it's something that I hope to do for, you know, quite a long time. I'm 41 years old, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. And you know, hopefully I can answer some questions for you, or, you know, kind of clear the air on some things, and or anything that you have for me.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Because to be honest, like, you know, there's three of us who actually run this podcast, but of the three, I'm sort of the one who would follow the NFL as, you know, more than the other two. And I've always found the sport so fascinating. And something that I've always wanted to do is talk to someone exactly like yourself, who the sort of coaching side of it. Because, you know, as a layman, we watch these amazing games on TV and we see these absolutely incredibly intricate and detailed sort of plays and stuff like that. And actually, it's going to be fascinating to talk to you to find out about how all of that comes together, the sort of processes and all of that for it, really. But just before we do that, just sort of, you've mentioned where you've been coaching. So you're currently at sort of high school now, but really, obviously, with the Detroit Lions, etc. What sort of coaching capacity are you there with? And, you know, what is it as, because obviously I know you're there at the Detroit Lions, but in your current high school, you're the head coach there. So is there a bit of a difference between the two roles that you've got there?
For sure. You know, for my high school here, I basically am in charge of the entire program year round. You know, right now we're in the off season, obviously. And so we're doing things like weightlifting. You know, I'm personally going to coaching conferences to network and meet other coaches to help me get better and improve on some things that I think I need to improve on. And then as we get going into the summertime, we'll really, you know, ratchet it up with our camps and stuff. We technically can't practice over the summertime, but we'll ratchet it up with camps, we call it, and go from there in preparation for the season. And so, and then with the Detroit Lions, what I do a couple different things. I work in their youth football program, which is really neat. So I get to go to Ford Field, which is the main stadium that the Lions work at, and I get to work with youth kids during their camp sessions, as well as sometimes some adults will get. So we'll get a lot of parent groups, or we'll get a lot of females and mother groups who come down and want to learn the game of football, and I get the opportunity to coach them through the Detroit Lions, which is pretty awesome. Then on our game days, I've at times had different responsibilities, you know, again, working with kids and stuff like that. Being able to be on the sideline for a National Football League game is pretty awesome stuff. And so I've been doing that for about 10 years, and it's been a lot of fun.
That's amazing. That is. In terms of the, we'll sort of start with the National Football League, and then we'll go back to your sort of role as a head coach, because that will lead nicely onto the other set of questions. Obviously, from a layman's perspective, we watch it on the TV. There just seems to be tons of people on the sidelines. If you compare that to a soccer match, where generally you have a few coaching staff and then the substitutes. What are all those sort of people doing? Because it seems like there's so many people, and obviously yourself included. Can it get a bit busy? Can you get lost in all of those people almost, if that makes sense?
Absolutely, it can. I mean, so you start in the NFL. You have a 53-man roster, so there's 53 people that are on the team, and so and with the game of American football, and at that level, all players only play either an offensive position, a defensive position, or a special teams position. So a kicker, a punter, or a kickoff guy or a kick return guy. And so with that, you need all those bodies on the sidelines. And so you have those guys. You will have most of your a handful of your assistant coaches. There'll be some of the assistant coaches that'll be sitting up in the press box, obviously, with the headset on, talking to the coaches on the field and communication and whatnot. So you'll have your assistant coaches. You'll have your athletic trainers. And the medical staff that are on the field to make sure that everybody's doing okay, especially nowadays with the emphasis on player health and safety,
of course,
concussions and CTE and whatnot. And I mean, we could do a whole episode on that, because to be honest with you, I think sometimes that can get overblown, and there has been a lot of changes over here in trying to make the game safer and how we teach things, how we teach technique to make it even more safe. So there's a lot of people on the sidelines with that. And then of course, obviously you'll have your photographers and the sound guys and the officials holding the down boxes, the first down markers, things of that nature. So it can be kind of crazy. I mean, we, at the high school level, I mean, there's not as many, obviously, but we definitely have to coach up and we spend time doing it, proper procedure on things, who goes onto the field when we make substitutions, when we're ready to punt, a couple plays before, we have a guy getting our punt team players ready to go, so they're smoothly going out into the field and it doesn't look sloppy and we have to call a timeout. So it can definitely be kind of chaotic, but as long as, like anything, as long as you're prepared and you practice it, it should be fine. But nobody's perfect, and obviously those things don't go the way we want it all the time.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating, because it leads nicely on to what we were going to talk about, the sort of high school aspect. Because for us in this country, if you're not playing the elite level of soccer, there's lots of different ways sort of down the pyramid. And so I played at a sort of semi-professional club and things like that. But the average gate of the average number of people would get there would be 30, 40, 50 people tops. But obviously, I suppose by the nature of the sport, in terms of playing a full-blown game of American football, it's hard to just have an amateur sort of thing. So I imagine like those high schools, they serve like a whole community, don't they? So you have like the whole community come out and watch the games and all of this. So I think it's so well sort of supported. But do you find, because you're the head coach of all of that, is there a lot of emphasis on you to make sure that everything is working and going as it should do? Like, is there quite a lot of pressure on you, I suppose, because not just from your own team, but even from the people on the sidelines, if that makes sense, observing?
Yeah, sure it does. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I take this role very seriously. I understand that I don't just represent, our football players, but I represent the school community, the surrounding city, anybody that's an alumnus of our school that went to our high school. I understand and take it really seriously that we're pretty, what we do is really important, and I take a lot of pride in it and make sure we want to represent people in a positive way that they can look back and say that they're proud of having me as their head coach. And it's kind of neat. You mentioned how some of the communities, really buy into, high school football here, especially in the areas of our country where it's not a big city. So you're talking like small towns and rural areas where they don't have, a lot of the major sports teams to root for. I mean, there are Friday nights, when we play our games, where towns will literally shut down, businesses will close, everybody will close, and go to the game on Friday night. Like, that's kind of their pro team. And it's a real special thing that we do, especially obviously autumn night, when an entire town goes to high school football game. It's a pretty neat feeling.
So I was going to say, sort of in terms of just particularly from, because I imagine we'll probably get people from, your sort of side listening to it, and then also people from our side listening to this. In terms of the context of where you're coaching now in high school, how does that work in terms of what sort of age group is it? And in high schools in this country, it literally is the people from the local area will be the players for that high school football team. And sorry, when I say football, I mean soccer team. And it's not well supported, and they tend to be during the school day. So, it's literally a few PE teachers on the side. watching. Obviously with yours, so what sort of age group is it? And do you get people players coming in from different parts of the country, or is it more sort of just within your local area, if that makes sense?
Yeah, for sure it does. So it's basically 14 to 18-year-old kids is what I'm working with.
Right.
And our public school system here, those are the areas where they'll get kids from the local community. So for example, let's say a local community here, Royal Oak High School, like they'll generally have their players all be from the city of Royal Oak, and it's that community aspect. So for me, I coach at a private Catholic high school. And so we generally draw kids. We can theoretically draw kids from everywhere, but most of our kids are from the local communities anyway. So it's slightly different, but definitely the local communities where we get most of our kids.
And I find that fascinating. If you don't mind me just drilling onto that a little bit, I promise we'll move on to those questions I sent you earlier. But
perfect.
It's
all good.
When you sort of say you're getting someone in from a different area, possibly because you're working with children, maybe players from 14 upwards. What is it you're sort of looking for? Because I suppose at 14, you're not still as physically developed as you might potentially be. I know you probably have a rough idea, but what is it you're looking for in like a 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old? Sure. If you're sort of hoping to draft them in from somewhere else, like a different area.
For sure. Yeah, it's the rules here are kind of different. And so at every state here has a slightly different rule in terms of like eligibility and what you can and cannot do. So from a strictly football perspective or from a strictly athletic perspective, I couldn't go and try to recruit a player to come play at my high school. Like we're not legally allowed to do that. So basically what kids will do in my situation is, they'll find out, like they'll know about the good things that we're doing, and we've done some good things since I've been here. And they'll hopefully, want to be gravitated to that to come here. But the type of kids I look for, and I say this, and it's a constant process working with kids though, is, we want the type of guys that are going to be coachable. And we want the type of guys that, you're proud to have, in your football program. So what are we talking about? Kids that are good in the classroom, not just on the field. Kids that sit in the front row in class, raise their hand when the teacher talks, being a servant leader. We talk about that all the time in our program. And so, to be honest with you, like I could coach 100 kids as long as they're good kids that are willing to listen and get better and develop as players and people. I'd coach 100 of those kids before I would a great athlete with a really bad attitude who thinks they have all the answers that doesn't want to be here.
I think that's
just kind of
that's fascinating. And I think that's something, I similar to yourself, I work in a school as well, and it's something that I've really tried to sort of speak to people about. And the way it works in this country is it is really on ability. There's no sort of emphasis on how they're getting on in school. So there's a boy that I used to coach, and he was expelled from school. So he got kicked out of the school and all this, and he still got offered a professional contract at a club. So lo and behold, he ended up unfortunately getting caught taking substances he shouldn't do, got booted out, so his career's over. But you probably could have identified that early on. But that's one thing that I think because you've obviously mentioned you were coached in college football as well. And even part of that, you have to keep a certain grade average, don't you? And I think that's something that American football, or maybe even American sports, in general, does so well, is it couples that academic and that I suppose, what is it? The sort of almost being a good citizen as part of being a good sportsman almost. And I think that's fascinating. Something that we as a sort of a sport in this country could definitely learn from, learn tons from.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you just mentioned the incident of the player who unfortunately had the incident with the substance abuse later on, and you thought maybe you could have nipped that earlier. I totally agree. Nobody here is perfect. We've had plenty of those players. Plenty of those players who unfortunately you don't reach them, and that ends up ultimately happening to them. And so it's still, the reason, like when I was younger, I definitely wanted to be nothing more than that guy that wins football games. I wanted to be that coach that would have my name in the paper and everybody would talk about me. And then as I get older, maybe it's because I had kids. I had 3 daughters, or have 3 daughters under the age of 13. God help me. Right. But maybe it's just matured me and changed me a little bit, but I definitely now, I get it. Like I want, I've had a former player of mine ask me to be the best man in his wedding, and that's as great as any victory I've had. And so it's amazing how things have changed like that, with my career and my life where I'm going. But yeah, ultimately though, we're still competitors. We still want to win. We want to do everything we can to put ourselves in the best position to win. And the hardest thing that I deal with, I think now, is our society here. It has a lot of it has become ultimately the bottom line and about wins and losses. And so we'll run into coaches in schools that will do those illegal things. You know, they will go out and try to recruit athletes from other schools and give them false narrative. You know, give them a false narrative that, oh, if you come here, you know, we'll make sure we get you into college. You know, if you come here, we'll make sure we're going to, you know, you're going to go play in the NFL. And so that's the sad part to me when adults are ruining it for the kids. Like, it should be about the experience of playing and not worrying about all that other stuff, because kids have so much stress in their life. And I mean, truthfully, I mean, college kids, high school kids, they have so much stress in their lives nowadays that, you know, you're just adding more stress to that. And I just don't think that's right. So, and the crazy thing, I'm sorry, you know, as I'm going, but a crazy thing, some of that pressure happens for even younger levels. You know, I'm talking, you know, 5 years old on up. Like there's such an emphasis on, you know, winning instead of the development and the experience. And you wonder why, like you're saying, we have kids with so many problems, you know, they're not allowed to enjoy being a kid. So that's one of the things we're fighting.
Yeah. I think that's amazing. If you don't mind me asking, is some of that what you're saying, you know, about these really over competitive sort of environments, you know, what you're saying about coaches and stuff, is that because obviously the time this episode going out, I mean, we're recording it a week before, but you've got the Super Bowl happening this week as the episode goes out. And is it because it's such a utopia of, you know, and if you don't want me saying, tremendous sums of money and all of that, is that what almost drives people beyond the love of the game? Not love of the game, but do you know what I mean? Can that be a motivator for people to want to maybe cheat? Maybe cheat is the right word, because it's just such a lucrative thing now, isn't it? So
absolutely. And there are so many, like, you know, there are so many offshoots of the game of football where people make money. So what I mean is, you know, there's a specialty on quarterbacks. So what you'll find is we get a lot of people that proclaim to be quarterback gurus. And so they'll set up programs and, hey, come work with me, you know, pay me $100 a session, and I'm going to develop you into be a great quarterback, you know. And so you'll get 30 kids that go there. And a lot of times, like, hang on a second, like, are you really making them a great quarterback, or are you just making money? You know, and there's a ton of them. And so that bothers me. So in that regard, absolutely, there is a little bit of that. And I think there's such an emphasis put on kids getting college scholarships playing sports. So the ability to go to college for free, right, to play a sport, whatever sport it is. And so with that, again, coming back to the pressure to win and be successful, and, you know, you got to hire the best coaches, and they better be awesome because you're going to develop my kid, and, you know, they're going to be the next Messi or, you know, Tom Brady, whatever it might be. And so there absolutely is that pressure, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating, and that's probably one of the similarities between the two sports now. If you went back 20 years, sort of soccer in this country was a bit more of a working man's sport. Now it's become so elite that, you know, you can barely afford to go to a game, etc. And I think maybe the main driver of that is the money that's available if you do get to the promised land. But you probably know better than me, because I know the amount of players you must see go through high school and college. The number that obviously make it to the actual NFL and become an established player, it's one in however many. It's so slim, you know. And there's, like you say, I suppose there's a lot of people that can make a lot of money out of that, isn't there?
Absolutely. And I had the luxury. I went to high school with a person, John Jansen is his name. He ended up playing football at the University of Michigan back in the mid '90s, and then he made it to the National Football League. And so but again, that's rare. I doubt I'll ever, you know, meet or know somebody like him, you know, for as long as I coach. But it is difficult. But it's funny, like when parents and people put money into their kid, you know, to get special training and whatnot, they expect, you know, their kid to go on and be highly successful. And then when they don't, you know, they ultimately will blame the coach instead of being realistic and looking at everything. So, yeah.
So what we'll do is we'll move on to a bit more about you, Brian, in terms of what you're doing now, because this is really the sort of point of the episode, is to really drill down into what you do as a head coach, and then what I maybe do is a bit more of a sort of a coach at a soccer team. So just before we do that, though, just to give a little bit of context, you obviously mentioned that you played football, you know, as you were growing up. What sort of drove you into being, you know, and I know you eventually became a head coach, but what even drove you into being a coach in your sport, if that makes sense? Was it like the fact that, for me, I've sort of started coaching because I ruptured 2 ligaments in my knee, and therefore I couldn't play sort of anymore. So for me, then it was a natural progression was to go into coaching, but, you know, it might be different for yourself. I don't know.
For sure. I love and appreciate all sports. You know, I teach the English, you know, I teach English over here And
Right.
but ultimately I'm certified to teach, PE like you, and ultimately I would like to do that someday. So I love all sports. I appreciate
Yeah.
what it teaches kids and people. Every sport teaches kids great life lessons on how to be and how to deal with adversity and whatnot, and how to never give up. I love all those things. And so for me, just the game of football, for me, I just remember the feeling of what it was like, to have a bond, with a bunch of guys who ultimately became my close friends,
Yeah.
in working out with them in preparation for the season and whatnot. All those feelings, those game day feelings of whatever sport it was, but for me, it was the game of football, those game day feelings and those emotions that went through my body and how it made me feel. I say it to this day, there's nothing you could put in your body that gives you that same feeling or that same rush of excitement of playing a sport and being involved on game day. And so I didn't want to let that go, to be honest with you. And so that's really what got me into coaching. Is just, I love that feeling and what it does for, and what it did for me. And then that feeling of what it could do for other people that I coach. And so that's really what wanted me to get into it.
I think that's amazing. Honestly, I was speaking to someone earlier today, and it almost sort of word for word, in that sense with me. And it is that feeling, isn't it? Sometimes it's not even the game. I don't know, it might be different in your sport, but in sort of soccer, there's like a time before you go out of the change rooms, and there's just like this buzz and this feeling, and you just can't replicate that. No matter how best, you try and do it at work, in your job, or you try and do it with your friends socially, you'll never get that same feeling as what you do when you're about to not go into battle with these people. But it is a bit like that, isn't it? It's that sort of
for sure it is.
And I think like you say, the closest you can probably get to that is the coach, if you're not playing, obviously.
Absolutely, absolutely. For me, it's funny. I tell all my kids in class, like on game day, like just leave me alone.
Exactly.
The anticipation is just, hey, you make sure you're good on game days. I'm going to lose my mind. So, and then so from where our locker rooms are to the field, there's a little bit of a walk. Probably a 500-foot walk from our locker rooms to the field, and that feeling on game day, and just you see the fans and the people cheering, and you see your opponent. Yeah, there's nothing like it.
Yeah. So sort of going on to that then, what I'd find, this is really what I want to get into. It's more the technical side of it, because me as a soccer coach now, so I coach, a team at the minute, and we've got a game this Saturday afternoon, and, we've had previous games, and I basically coach the whole team. Admittedly, it's only sort of 16 to 18 players, but I've got to work on the defensive side, the attacking side, the sort of, as we would call it, set pieces, so corners, free kicks, etc. But obviously, I know you have a lot more players, but your structure of coaching would be almost the opposite of that. How does that work? Because I know you're the head coach. And once you sort of explain that, would you just sort of say how much not input, but how much you do, and how much is, how much do you sort of lead, and how much physical sort of coaching are you doing, if that makes sense, when you're a head coach?
Yeah, it does. So every, like any sport, I think any coach is different, and everybody's personality is different, and how they do things and what they want to do things. For me, I still like to have a very hands-on approach of what we do in day-to-day practices. And so other coaching staffs that I've been around, the head coach will be more of kind of just an overseer, hands off, and structurally just kind of watch everything to make sure it's going well. For me, I'm different. And so what we do is we have on offense and defense, we'll have coaches for each position. Okay. Right. So for example, on offense, we'll have our quarterbacks, our running backs, our offensive linemen, our receivers, our tight ends, and we'll have we have coaches for each of those positions. And then we'll do the same thing for the defense. And offensively, I coach the quarterbacks. And the reason I coach the quarterbacks is because I'm heavily involved in our offense. Right. And I believe that the quarterback and I have to be on the same page 100% of the time. Yeah. And that's obvious. I mean, the great quarterbacks have great offensive coordinators in the National Football League. They just do. They have a great working relationship. And so for me, that's really important. There are some head coaches who are more defensive-minded head coaches, and they might not, work with the quarterback, but they'll hire somebody, to work with the quarterbacks that they trust, and potentially run the offense. And so, but for me, I definitely, I'm very hands-on with the quarterbacks, and then in that regard, when we practice our specific skills each day for our position, I work with the quarterbacks. And so there are some head coaches that, like I said, they'll have their own coaches do that. But I like to, for me, I don't know. I still think I'm fairly young. I still think I'm fairly fit. I like to be, I like to tell myself that, but I like to be involved. I like to get my, my hands dirty a little bit, and I like to be active and coaching and whatnot. I couldn't imagine, not doing that. And so that's kind of the way I do it.
And if you don't mind me asking, because obviously you said you'd probably be, you're involved a lot more with the sort of the offense, etc.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the defense, then do you sort of have someone you go to as one of your coaches and say, right, I'm fairly happy for you to do not what you want, obviously, but within our sort of ethos and our sort of approach to the game. But do you have much involvement in that, or is it a bit like so and so Coach A over there? You go and do what you need to do with like the defensive side, and then you sort of just bring that all together when the closer you get to the game, or how does that sort of work? So, like you say, you spend part of your time you coach with your quarterback. Sorry.
Yeah. So I have a coach that is our defensive coordinator. Right. And, when I hire anybody, the first thing I do is to make sure I think they're good with kids. And if they're good with kids and they care about the kids and they coach for the right reasons, I'll hire them. And so this guy I go back a long ways with, and he's phenomenal. And I would trust him with my family. He's just a great guy. And so when it comes to defense, for example, like each week we'll go into our game plan. So our weekend, we'll game plan over the weekend. I definitely focus 98% of the time on the offense, but I'll definitely check in a little bit and kind of get an idea of what they do defensively, and then check in with him to see what his thoughts are. And I wanted to make sure too, when I hired a defensive coordinator, that he and I kind of have the same philosophy. So we want to be, we want to be aggressive. We want to play fast. We want to be loud. We want to create chaos. We don't want the offense to dictate the game. Defensively, we want to dictate the game. And so with that, and knowing that I hired a guy who was really similar to my beliefs, he does have a lot of the free reign. And so when he puts things together over the weekend, it's one of those things where I just ask him, hey, what do we got this weekend? Or what do we have this weekend? So, and then we'll go from there. And then when we practice our defense, it's absolutely his show. I'll just be, I'm still active and involved. I definitely don't stand off to the side and watch everybody do their thing. I'm still active and involved because I think it's important to your players that they see the head coach, with everything being involved and being committed. And if the head coach is involved, then it's something important that they all need to pay attention to.
I think it's I find that fascinating because from my structure at the minute, I'm like the coach, but we would call it a manager in England. You probably see that whenever you watch the sort of soccer. Right. I sort of have to liaise with him and say, right, on Saturday I felt like we need to work on A, B, and C. And then he's happy for me to go and do that. But obviously that's just me. And if I do a bad session, I probably know that, and I sort of know how to maybe resolve that. But from your perspective, you don't need to, please don't sort of give names and, particular details, but do you ever have like disagreements almost because you've got so many more people to manage do you know what I mean by that in terms of the coaching? Do you ever have like someone saying, well, actually, Brian, I think what you're wrong, we should be doing is this, this, and this instead of what you've suggested almost? Or does that not really happen? Are you all sort of on the same page?
Oh, well, 100%. It happens all the time. And I think that's a healthy thing. I think the worst thing a coach or a manager could do is have an ego so high that they're not listening to others. Okay. And they're not listening to their coaching staff. And so to me, when we have disagreements or when we have discussions about how to do things, I think that makes everybody better. I think it's better, for the kids. I think it's better for us coaches to maybe think outside the box a little bit. Like, okay, I need to look at it this way. And that happens all the time. And I'd like to think that I give my staff a lot of leeway with what we can do or what we can try to do, especially in the summertime when it's like preseason, when we're just getting ready, like maybe how to coach a certain technique one way. And I'll say, okay, give it a try. And if it doesn't work and I don't like it, then we won't do it, but give it a try. And if it works great, then fine. Because I think it's really important that what I tell our coaches is that you are the head coach of your position. That's how important you are to our program. That's how important you are to our players. And that's how, I view you. That's how much I respect you. And I want you to feel proud in what you're doing. And so, if I don't feel that way, and if I didn't feel that way, and I just had guys, on my staff that I was going to tell them what to do every day and not listen to them, then I shouldn't hire them in the first place. That's not making anybody better. So I definitely, I think those, like we call it, like, knock down, drag out, game planning meetings, we talk and we have it out. Sure. It might be, some weeks it might be personnel. To be honest with you, for us, our biggest disagreements has been personnel. Like, how do we put our players in the best position to be successful? And you're going to get differing opinions. And that's, like I said, I just think it's healthy because you're trying to figure out, everybody wants to do, what's right for the program. And that's going to help you win a game, and it's okay to disagree.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating because you're all pulling in the the same direction. I think that's, I really appreciate you being so honest about that actually as well, because I think, like you say, there is the temptation, particularly at your end of, being a head coach and in the structure we have here, being a manager, to try and almost show that, you're never wrong. And actually, I think that's very, very admirable of you to sort of be so honest about that. But one thing I find fascinating about, American football, and albeit I'm probably going to get loads of the sort of lingo and that wrong, but I just love the sort of plays that, and it's actually something that I've tried to use. So in obviously soccer, we have set pieces like corners, free kicks, and it's something that I've tried to incorporate, is having these real set, drilled down, detailed routines of, as the ball's being kicked, you need to be here, you're going to block him, all of this sort of thing. And I've actually tried to use a little bit of, so for a corner routine where we have like an attacker who blocks another marker, et cetera, et cetera. And I've actually learned just from watching a bit of the sort of American football, that sort of thing. But how much detail, how long does it take to get those sort of things rehearsed? And, is it just doing reps and reps and reps and reps with these kids until eventually it's learned almost? Or is it a bit of like, right, I'll show you this, now you go off and do it, and then we'll come back together sort of thing, if that makes sense?
Yeah. It does make sense. So for sure. So every off season, what we do as a staff is we get together and we talk about on offense and defense. Okay, what are some things that, we're definitely doing again and we're keeping it in, and this is our offense and this is our personality and we're not changing. And then what are some things you think maybe we should take out? What are some things maybe we should add to it? What are some things maybe we should, slight tweak or change here and there? That happens all the time. I think you're always evolving. If you're stale as an offense or a defense, then you're never going to get better. I mean, I think you have to always look for ways that you can do to help you ultimately win games. And so when we decide on what we're doing, I think the biggest mistake coaches make in the game of football is we will have too much offense or defense or too little offense defense. And I think we're always battling to find right is the right mix, because you only have so many hours a week to practice. And the kids still have to go to school, the kids still have to do their homework, the kids still have to deal with their girlfriend or whatever.
No, of course. No, that's a big thing, isn't it? Yeah.
And so it is. And so you have to decide as a coaching staff how much the kids can handle. And it doesn't always work perfectly. It might take a couple weeks into the season to figure out, all right, like we may have given that player too much responsibility, or you know what, maybe we have too much offense in this week, let's scale it back a little bit. So I mean, it's kind of a cop-out answer that it depends, but it really does depend on how much your kids can handle. And then really like how much do you need? I think one of the most frustrating things that happens to me as an offensive thinker is I will game plan and we will structure our offensive game plan for the week to go against a certain defense, right? Or a certain personnel grouping. And then we go to the game and our opponent is in something completely different. It's pouring rain, or it's really windy. Yeah. And so you have to be able to adapt then. Okay, well, what we just practiced all week, we kind of got to get rid of because that's not the defense we're seeing. And so that can be kind of frustrating, but it does happen. And so like going back to it, you have to have enough in that you can be adaptable every week, but you don't want to have too much where you paralyze your players, in their minds because they're thinking and they're not playing fast. So I guess that's the fun of it too, I guess, but it can be frustrating.
It's quite interesting you mentioned that because, if you don't mind me asking, in terms of, so the coaching that I do, even when I'm sort of at school, is if we're lucky, we might have 2 hours a week. So it'd be like maybe on a Tuesday evening or a Thursday evening, and then they play their games on a Saturday. Obviously, am I right in thinking that high school football, where you are, is played on a Friday night generally? Yes. Across the week then, how much sort of time do you get to see with the players? And if it is every day, if you don't mind being a bit more detailed, what are you sort of doing on each of those days? So like, is the first sort of couple of days, is that a bit more individual work where, say you're working with the quarterbacks, and then do you sort of try and bring it all together as a whole offense later on in the week? Or do you know what I mean? If you just sort of, does that make sense, that kind of question? Sorry, a bit wordy, but.
Yeah, for sure. No, like I said before, every coach is different in their philosophies and how they do things. And it's important that, when I talk to coaches, especially younger coaches, figure out what works best for you, because everybody is different. I don't think there is one right way to do things, or everybody would be doing it. And so for us, in the years past, we have not brought in kids on the weekend to do stuff. And the reason is because, like I said, all of our kids don't all come from like a local community. Some of them come as far as 45 minutes away. And
Right.
so it's very difficult, I think, for me to ask them and their families, hey, I need you here on Saturday morning at 9 a.m. for example, because we're going to do some workouts or watch a video or whatnot. And so this year we've talked about how, all right, maybe we can change that a little bit. Maybe we can do that with just the older kids. But I'm getting off track a little bit. But for us,
no, not at all.
Okay, so for us, we did not have kids come in on the weekend, but we're going to try. So ultimately, after a game, in a perfect world, you can come in on Saturday early in the morning, get a stretch in, maybe get a little lift in, a little small workout in, light workout, light jog, just to kind of, loosen up a little bit. And then go in and we'll watch some film of the night before, kind of critique what's going on, let them go. And then as a coaching staff, I mean, we're then it's like, game plan time next week. I mean, it's time to move on. I think one of the hardest thing, in sports, especially for us, playing a game once a week, it's very easy to have that game, whether it's a win or a loss, impact you all weekend and then the start of the following week. And you have to learn, like what we say is the 24-hour rule. So like no matter what, win or loss, have that feeling for 24 hours and then it's on to the next opponent. And so
that's it. It's very good advice, actually. I appreciate it. So.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So we do that over the weekend. The coaches put the game plan together, and then Monday for us is generally kind of a mental day. So what we'll do is we'll work out. We'll work on the defensive formations we think our opponent is going to do against us. Or excuse me, So we'll work on the offensive formations we think our opponent is going to line up against. So we'll make sure our defense is lined up correctly against every offensive formation we think we'll see. Then we'll do the same thing with our offense. We'll get our offense, to stand out there. And we'll show all the different defenses that we think our opponent is gonna give at us. And so that is a big mental day for us. And it's also another day where we'll watch some more film. From there, we do a little bit of skill work every day, Monday through Wednesday.
That's amazing.
And we vary it on which days we'll do more offense or which days we'll do more defense. But every day, each position group has to do a skill work, and we call it everyday drills. And so our quarterbacks know we're doing our everyday drills like Monday through Wednesday. They just know it, and we call it individual. We call it indie. We just blow, when we're done stretching or warming up, blow the whistle, indie. And everybody hustles over to their position group, and they just do it for 15 minutes or whatever we have scripted that day. From there,
sorry, just really quickly before I interrupt, before you go on to like the day after that, with that individual work you're talking about, if you say in your head who your starting quarterback is going to be, do they get a bit of extra? Do they get a bit more time? Do they get a bit of extra? If they're going to be starting that Friday, or is it because of where you are in a high school? Is it sort of evenly split between, say, the 3 or 4 quarterbacks you've got there? If that makes sense.
Yeah, during the individual work, it's more of their individual skill stuff. So everybody gets equal time. So that doesn't matter. So for example, if we're working footwork through the agility ladder, every quarterback's going to go through it.
Right.
If we're working, if we're playing catch, doing just our basic kick step stuff, I mean, every quarterback's going to do that. So in that regard, everybody does the same. From after individual work, though, what we'll do is what we call group work. Okay, so we'll split. Let's say on an offensive day, our group work, we're going to take our running backs and our offensive linemen and our quarterback, and we're going to work nothing but running plays. So we call it inside run. So any play that's going to be run inside the tackles, we'll work on that, which is those guys. That's our group work. And then our receivers, they could be doing something else at that time. So they could be doing, they can work on their route running. They can work on any new routes that we're installing. They could work on their blocking, we call it stock blocking. So that's the group time. And then what we'll do is we'll do another group session. Okay. So then what we'll do is we'll do our passing skeleton, it's called. So our quarterbacks and our receivers will throw all of our pass routes against the defense. Okay. And then our offensive lineman has free time to work on something else. So they might be able to work on pass protection or one-on-one pass rushes or whatever our offensive line coach thinks is necessary that day. After that is then generally we'll go to our total team setting where the entire offense is on the field against an entire defense to run plays. So it's one of those things like the saying where the whole is the sum of the parts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? We start small and then work our way up. And then when we get to a team session, where it's everybody's on the field 11 on 11. We only really run about 10 plays, and it's fast. We try to do it as fast as possible. Blow the whistle. We want to run the next play every 7 seconds right there. Go as fast as possible,
Wow.
and then we're done. So most of our teaching comes during the individual period and then during the group periods. And then lastly for us, on Thursdays, that to me is really a big mental day. And so I know I kind of said that on game day, I tell everybody, hey, like, leave me alone. Like, it's game day. Like that. It's kind of similar on the Thursday before a game. It needs to be a perfect mental practice. Like, we want no mistakes. We want high energy. We want to make sure everybody does, is on the same page. I tell the coaches, like, this is not a day for us to get upset at kids or to raise our voice. We want their mind to be ready to go to battle, tomorrow night. So that's what Thursday is. And then Friday, it's go time.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant because, to be honest, I've been involved in youth coaching through my job a lot as well. And I think as a sport, football in general, soccer in general, and particularly in England, we really forget that individual work that you were talking, or as you put it, even the individual and the group work. And I think there's so much value. And I know the sports are slightly different because I suppose with American football is a lot more of it's rehearsed and you can, because by nature it's probably a bit more stop-start than what soccer would be. But there's still so much individual work that you can do before you start looking at the team stuff. And I think, we really miss that in this country. I think, if there's anyone sort of listening, I think there's so much value in what you're saying about that,
Yeah, I agree. And I think like we kind of mentioned before, I do think there's a lot of similarities in the two sports. One of the things that, like I mentioned, we play fast and we try to get a playoff every 7 seconds. Well, a lot of teams here have started to kind of evolve to that, where although there's still a lot that'll use the huddle, and they have 30 seconds to get to call the play in the huddle, and then they go to the line of scrimmage and snap the ball. Teams do that, but there's a lot of teams, coaches, myself included, where it's like, heck no, like, let's go. Like, none of this, like, huddling, let's go. Like, people don't pay to come to a football game to watch me huddle. That's what I say.
No, that's true. That's a very good way of putting it, actually.
Let's go. Let's go, and so there are some similarities there. And then, like, I like that when I watch soccer, I compare it a lot to hockey or sometimes basketball, and that, like, you definitely can, you're right, be more free flowing, or in basketball, you can give it, to your great athlete, point guard, LeBron James. And yes, he could get a rebound and go all the way down the floor and dunk it, and score. That absolutely, can't happen. But, like you're saying, there still has to be skill work. Like, kids still have to dribble a basketball every day, right? Or kids still have to dribble a football every day. Like, you need to have, your passing needs to be perfect with each side of your foot, in soccer. Like, I get it. So there's definitely, and I think it's very easy for coaches in all sports, in their minds, and I used to be here, we think X's and O's. Like, oh, we're going to win a game because I'm going to call the perfect play.
Exactly,
right? Or in soccer, I'm going to call the perfect defense. It's like, a lot of times, no, we're going to win a game because, last January and February, we had a great workout. Or in the summertime, right, we had a great camp where we were teaching the details of our stance, and the details of how we're blocking and where we're putting our hands. It's those little things that win football games. And I'm sure those little things that win soccer games, those little things that win hockey matches and basketball games.
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head with that. I think that's such I think that goes across all sorts of sports. And actually, it is sometimes, I've done an interview with a different coach who's involved in women's football in this country. And she was saying, actually, that sometimes it is quite difficult to not make it about yourself as well, isn't it? And I know that obviously in the nature of your sport, so much of it is fine detailed work and a lot of rehearsing, but actually it's still the players who need to go and act that out, isn't it, I suppose? So you can only take that so far as a coach. And maybe it is sometimes, I'm guilty of that, definitely. If something works, so if we score from a particular corner routine, sometimes it's a bit like, oh yeah, I sort of attribute that to me. And obviously part of it is me, but the players still had to go and carry that out, and you still had to place that trust in them, didn't you? So I think maybe even more so in your sport, you can give them as much information and give them as much quality coaching. I suppose they've still got to act out that play that you've called, really, haven't they? If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely they do. I mean, and that happens. Like, we're human, right? I mean, we do something good. We're going to feel good about it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly.
I get it. But ultimately, right, we're teaching the kids, like, I say to our kids, like, I don't want you to be a robot. If you have questions or you see something, like, then let's let's talk about it, and I'll take your advice, and let's look at it. And if it works and it's going to help us win a game, it's going to help us win a game. Absolutely. I mean,
and that goes back to your
ultimately though. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say that goes back to your sort of those coaches who are a bit more X's and O's. I suppose that's what I was sort of alluding to, was the fact that I think you're probably in a similar school to me, that it's not just about those wins. It is about the development of them as players and as people, I suppose, isn't it? That's as important.
Absolutely. And I talk about the next step in our program is, and I've told the players, and I tell them every day that I see them at school. And when I mean every day, I'm not kidding, like every day. I know as a program, we will have made it to the elite status when our players, are the ones that say to everybody, that's not what we do here. Like say to other football players, hey, that's not what we do here. Instead of me saying that, I'll know we made it when our players take that upon themselves and take that responsibility on and that ownership that, no, that's not what we do. We're better than that, instead of me saying that. So ultimately that's the goal, where it's like, it's them and it's player led, and I don't have to do anything. I can sit back and enjoy it.
Yeah. So I'm just conscious, Brian, because I know you've got a thing ranged at 4:00 your time, haven't you? So I was just going to ask two more questions very, very quickly, if that's all right, and then we'll
absolutely
wrap it up. So I'll cut that out and edit that little bit out that I just spoke about. But so yeah, obviously just to sort of round it all off, in terms of being involved in like a head coach sort of role, is there anything that you would sort of give advice to anyone who's maybe, like you were when you were a bit younger, coming out of the sort of actual playing side of it and going into the sort of coaching aspect? Is there any sort of, if you had some nuggets of advice, what would they sort of be, really?
Yeah, I would say that, there's, like I said, there's not, everybody's path is different, so there isn't a right path when you compare yourself to others. So somebody might be a head coach in their sport at the age of 30. Some people might not take them to the age of 50. Like, there isn't a path. And so you can easily get frustrated if you're not where you think you should be. And so I think the two things that I'm most proud of in my life is that, from a coaching perspective, is even if I knew I wasn't ready for a certain job, I still applied for it, because in my heart, like, I always wanted that mindset and mentality that, like, no, I'm going to do everything I can to get this job. Even though in my mind, in my heart, I maybe knew I wasn't ready for it, but I still, that mentality of like, I'm going to attack it anyway, because I want to improve myself and I want to see where I'm at. And if I don't get the job, then I'm going to be disappointed for a day, but it's going to ultimately make me more motivated to get better. That's one thing I'm proud of. And so I've applied for many head coaching jobs, and I've been hired twice to be a head coach out of probably 50. I've probably not gotten 50 jobs. So two out of 50 really isn't that good. But I believe that, they have that mentality that it doesn't matter. You want something, that's what you're working for. Do everything you can to get it. And then the second thing is, like, be humble, stay humble, and have a lot of humility, and learn as much as you can about your sport. Like, whatever it is, whenever it is. And so if somebody has a great idea, like, listen to them and take notes on it, and integrate that into your brain. So ultimately, maybe one day that's something you will use, like, whatever it might be. And so, like, you can get coaching ideas from any coaches of other sports. I love reading coaching books, coaches of all sports. It doesn't matter to me. I love that. And so always, just be a sponge, and always, try to get better.
That's fascinating. I really appreciate the advice on that. And then the last question, obviously, we're releasing this on the week of the Super Bowl. So is obviously it'll be on the Sunday of this week. Just a really, really quick prediction from you. You're obviously a lot more in the know than me. I speaking to my friends at the beginning of the season, I took a gamble on just saying that I thought the Kansas City Chiefs would get to the Super Bowl. I had no actual knowledge of how they would do that, just the fact that I thought Patrick Mahomes was a fairly decent quarterback. But again, that was a complete layman's view. But from someone who's an expert, what do you think is going to happen on Sunday?
For sure. Well, I definitely don't think I'm an expert, but I appreciate the compliment. But
well, you're an expert in comparison to me, if nothing else. So yeah.
All right, fair enough. I'll take that. There are two teams that really are, like, different. And so, you get the Kansas City Chiefs, and their offense is more wide open. They like to throw it a lot. They have exciting receivers. They have a veteran head coach who's been there before. Then conversely, the 49ers, they have a young head coach. They don't throw it a lot. They're real physical. They like to run the ball. So I think it's going to be great. But I will say this. I think Patrick Mahomes, there's just something special about him. Yeah. And he is a difference maker. Like, he has a LeBron James, Lionel Messi quality. Like, there's something special about what he does. And so if I had to, place a bet. Not that I condone that sort of thing.
But I know what you mean.
I agree with you that I think it'll be the Kansas City Chiefs. So
very good. That's amazing, Brian. I really appreciate you coming on. And as I say, hopefully it won't be the last we hear from you. Actually, it'd be great to get you back on another time and sort of explore some other stuff a bit more. Actually, so
yeah, Charlie, I appreciate it. That was a lot of fun. Anytime, I'd love to talk to you.